Steve, welcome to the On Adventure podcast. As you know, you've been very integral in me getting this launched and some of the details behind it, but I'm excited to hear some of your stories of your past adventures and see where this goes. So thanks for joining today. And I think everybody will be interested to hear about your stories.
Well, happy to be here and I appreciate you inviting me to be on the show.
Yeah, very good. So you're in Wisconsin right now, if I'm correct, but you haven't always lived there. I know a little bit about your work history, so I wanted to ask you. Your website has you listed as CEO, podcaster, author, coach. You're doing a lot of different things, and I wondered if you could just give a little history about how you got to that point within your work career.
Well, I guess I could say I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up. I mean, I'm almost 61 at this point and still figuring it out. But no, I really am fortunate to be able to do what I do. And at a very early age, I was interested in the financial services area. My dad, for example, has been an investor for as long as I can remember. And when I was growing up, we'd have the radio on. This is back in the 1970s. We'd have the radio on, and every weekday at 5:18, the Market Minute would come on the radio, and they talk about the stocks of local interest. And so I'd always hear that. And eventually, when I was in high school, I had a couple $1,000 and asked my dad what I should do with it. He said, well, you should invest it. And make a long story short, I made my first investment back when I was a teenager. And so I was always interested in financial services and go to college, get a finance degree. And ultimately, it took me a few years to get in the industry, but finally got in the industry in 1993 and have been in financial services ever since then. The bulk of that time was working for other people. And then when I turned 50, decided it was time to do my own thing. So decided to hang out my own shingle. And that's what I've been doing for the past 11, 12 years or so. And today doing some podcasting, do business coaching, one-on-one coaching with financial advisors. And then I also have another software business with a business partner where we provide digital tools for financial advisors that they use as they work with their clients. So it's, again, very fortunate that I get to do what I get to do and have time to do fun shows like this.
Cool. So your story of adventure, the different things that I know, some of those things that you've done, where does that weave into your work timeline? Was that something that you got into later in life, or have these pursuits been something from very early age that were part of your life?
Yeah, well, it actually didn't happen until later in life, but the interest was sparked earlier. And when I was in high school and college, I was a competitive distance runner, ran track and cross country in high school and college. And when I was a senior in high school, I was invited to a national cross country meet that was held in the summer of 1980. And it was held in Seattle, Washington. And I was born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska. So I was living in Omaha at the time, had never been out to the West Coast. So my mom flies out there with me and we drive into a little town called Puyallup, Washington, which is, I think, southeast of Seattle. And when we flew in, it was cloudy, couldn't really see anything. This was, of course, is way before the internet. And so I really didn't have a concept of the geography and everything out there. And so the next morning I wake up, I walk outside and I look around and I said, oh my gosh, what is that? And of course, that was Mount Rainier. And it was just like the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And so I turned to my mom and I said, Mom, I want to come back someday and I want to climb that. And so that was like this initial inspiration for wanting to do something out in the mountains. And again, that was 1980. Well,
you said that at that moment without
Yeah.
any past history in the mountains or anything like that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I guess the previous past history in the mountain was as a family, when I was probably 14, we took a trip to Colorado and we stayed at Rocky Mountain National Park. So I had spent a little bit of time in the mountains, but I was, essentially, like I said, maybe 14 years old or so. So I had a concept of what the mountains were, but and we climbed a little dinky mountain there at Rocky Mountain National Park. So I had a little bit of a flavor for it at that point, but it wasn't until 1980 when I really saw Rainier and just was, wow, that was something incredible. So yeah, so from 1980, again, life gets in the way. I go to school, I get a job, I work, I get married. And then it was in 2000, I would say like 2003, I was reading Outside Magazine, and they had a cover story on the top 10 climbs in North America. And I thought, oh, this will be interesting. So I'm reading through it, and number like 5 or 6 was Mount Rainier. And they just described, here's how you climb it. You can use a guiding company. Here are the 2 or 3 companies that you should reach out to. And I thought, that's it. And so I reached out to one of the guiding companies. I got a buddy of mine who also had a previous run-in with Mount Rainier when he was in college, and he actually got up to the high camp and did a little day trip. And so he was anxious to go back and do a summit climb. So he and I hooked up, and in 2004, that was my first climbing adventure, and it was Mount Rainier. And yeah, so it took 24 years from that initial spark to when I actually did the first trip. And from then it's been, just a full love affair here with being out in the mountains.
I'm always interested about those sparks. What is it that kind of opens that door to the soul to drive in one direction or another? And I remember the first time, I think I was in Portland in college, and I'm not sure which mountains are around there, but it was the first time I saw one of those peaks. The clouds kind of parted, and it almost looks like it's floating in the air. And it was unbelievable. So I'm sure Rainier was something spectacular. I do think it's pretty telling that you went from flatlander with no mountaineering experience to climbing that mountain. That's not, hiking the Blue Ridge Mountains on the East Coast. I mean, you went big out of the gate. And how high is that peak at the summit?
Yeah, it's 14,411.
And on a scale of like technicality, if 10's the most difficult, where does that one lie?
Well, it depends on what you're comparing it against. I mean, if you're comparing it against Everest or K2, it's a walk in the park. And also it depends on what route you take. And so the route that I did on my first climb of Mount Rainier was what they call Disappointment Cleaver, which is the main route for people who are not interested in a super technical climb. So it's the kind of climb where if you are in good shape and they teach you some training along the way if you go with a guiding company, they spend half a day in a climbing school. So they teach you basic walking with a rope. They teach you how to self-arrest. They teach you the rest step. They teach you some breathing techniques when you get higher up in the mountains that could be helpful to avoid getting a headache. So they teach you the basics. And so basically, if you're in good shape and you have a little bit of luck and you don't get some altitude sickness, you can make it to the top. And I was fortunate on that first trip that I made it to the top and back down, but it was definitely, it was a gut buster for me to get up and down for that first one.
Had you stayed in shape at some level for those 20 some years between college and actually getting on the mountain?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I ran competitively in college for my first 3 years. And my senior year in college, I realized I'm not going to the Olympics. I mean, I was definitely not Olympic caliber as a distance runner. And so I started thinking about my career and decided instead of running my senior year, I would take a job. So I ended up becoming the business manager of the college newspaper, which was a terrific job. Had a lot of fun doing that. And basically, at the end of my junior year of outdoor track, I pretty much didn't do a lot of exercising after that. And it was a good, well, let's see, I really didn't start picking up good exercising, consistent exercising again until probably about 2001 or 2002. And yeah, so I had a long period in there where I didn't get out of shape by any means. I mean, I've never really been what I would consider out of shape, but I wasn't doing a consistent workout program until probably 2001 or 2002.
And after that first mountain adventure, did you immediately start making the list of the 3, 4, 5, 6 other mountains that you wanted to do next, or was it a little more slow into it?
Well, that first trip, like I said, it was a gut buster. And so I go into that first trip and I'm thinking to myself, I'm a cocky guy. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get to the summit. I'm going to conquer this thing. I'm going to stand on the top. I'm going to raise the ice axe above my head. This is going to be awesome. And so that was my objective going into it. Was like, I'm going to get to the summit. I'm setting a goal. I'm going to get to the summit. And
Conquering.
exactly. Yeah. So that was my mindset going into this. And the particular trip that I signed up for was a fast trip. So we basically started the climb at 9 o'clock in the morning at the trailhead, which is at about, let's call it 5,500 feet in Paradise, Washington. And then you go up to the high camp, which is at about 10,000 feet. So that took about 5 or 6 hours. And then you kind of putz around at the high camp for 3 hours. And now it's about 6 o'clock at night on the first day. They put you in the bunkhouse. You try and get some sleep for about 6 hours, but there's 25 other people in this bunkhouse and everybody's farting and making noises and no one's getting any sleep. and
Not really
and then they
conducive
wake you
for
up.
a good night of sleep.
No. And I'm nervous because I'm like,
Yeah.
this is totally out of my comfort zone. And so then, they get us out at about midnight and get a little bit of coffee and some oatmeal. And then at 1:30 in the morning, we're heading up, got our headlamps on and everything. And so, from 1:30 in the morning till I think we hit the summit probably about 8 or so in the morning. Beautiful climb, but I was just beat up in terms of this is hard. And so I distinctly remember getting to the summit. And if you're familiar with the summit of Mount Rainier, so it's a volcano. And when you get to the top, if you think back to when you were a kid and you were sledding on snow, we had these saucers, like a silver saucer that you could sit in and just slide down. Well, the summit of Mount Rainier is exactly like one of those saucers. But the route that we took, when you get to the top, the saucer was slanted down slightly. Okay. So I get to the lip of the summit. I'm like, we're here. And they're like, well, no, the actual summit, you have to go down the middle, right across the crater here, up a little ways to the other side. That's the true summit. And I'm like, oh man, how in the world am I going to make this? And I said, okay, I've gone this far. So I trudged another like 45 minutes to get to the true summit. I signed the register, come back to the original lip that I came up on, and I can just, as clear as day, remember this, standing there, and I'm thinking, they're going to have to call a helicopter. There's no way in the world that I am going to get down from this mountain. I am so tired right now. And when I get to altitude, it's hard for me to eat. Nothing tastes good. And I felt like I was starting to slur my words a little bit. I'm like, am I drunk or what the heck is going on here? This is not good. And I realized that, no helicopters coming to save me here. So I got to get down this thing. So we're starting to go down the mountain. And the reason why they call this a disappointment cleaver is the cleaver is actually a ridge. It's a rocky ridge that sticks out like the spine on a triceratops or, whatever the dinosaur is that has these big bony spikes sticking out. So we're going down this ridge, and every step you take, I didn't realize I had to cut my toenails really short. So sort of at the top of the ridge as we're going. Yeah. So I remember I put my foot down, and all of a sudden my big toenail just went like straight up. It caught something on the inside. And so I almost ripped off my full big toenail. So for the rest of the down climb, every step I took was this jarring pain in my foot because my toenail was trying to rip off.
I mean, that probably felt like a nail going into your toe every single step that you took.
Exactly. And so I finally got to the bottom, and I basically said to myself, I am not doing this again. This was just not fun. And so that first trip, even though it was beautiful, I would say two things that I learned there. One is you got to enjoy the journey. I mean, you got to enjoy the trip itself, because if it's all about the summit and you don't make the summit, then you're going to feel like, well, this is just a total waste. And even though I did make the summit, I didn't enjoy the route to get there. And so that was the first thing, is I got to figure out a different way. If I am going to do this again, I got to figure out, how can I really enjoy this thing along the way? And so it took a while afterwards where it started to kind of coalesce in my mind that, well, if I could do this a different way, maybe I'll do it again. And it took 4 years before I did it again. And instead of doing that route, I said, okay, I'm going to take a route that takes several days, because I want to be able to enjoy it along the way. I want to be able to take pictures along the way. And I want to make sure I'm in better shape as well. So 4 years later, I did what's called the Emmons route, which is on the other side, almost on the other side of the mountain. And it's a longer route and there's nobody there. And so that was a wonderful trip. We had great weather, and you took several days, had 2 camps on the way up and a camp on the way down, and made the summit on that one too. So that really, I think, renewed my interest in wanting to continue to mountain climb, because I found a different way to do it that made me feel like this is fun. I'm challenging myself, but I'm not killing myself.
That's interesting to me that you found even in that first trip that the benefit, the true summit experience was the journey itself, not actually getting to the top. And I'm sure we'll have other stories here in a second where you've gone on these trips and you haven't made the summit, and what you learned from that. Was there a point in that first trip where you stood on the summit and held your hands above your head and said, I conquered this thing and look at me? Or were you too beat at that point?
I was pretty much too beat at that point. And, there is, we do have a picture of me on the summit. There's a picture of me signing the summit register, but I almost look delirious. I mean, it's like I'm dazed and confused, like the Led Zeppelin song.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I definitely remember being on the top, but it was not a feeling of conquering like I thought it was going to be. I mean, and as I reflected back over time, after I got back to sea level and really reflected on it, I realized that was dumb. I mean, you don't conquer a mountain. And, basically, the mountains, they humble you. They teach you lessons. And totally. I realized that, going forward, I was really in awe of mountains and really respectful of mountains, and got to the point where, I'm allowed to reach the summit. And so after that, on future trips, when I climbed and when I was allowed to reach the summit, I didn't stand with an ice axe over my head. I took a knee. And so my summit shots since then are pictures of me on one knee in being humble, that for a number of things. One, that I have the physical conditioning to be able to do this. Second, that I've got the financial resources and wherewithal to be able to take time to do something like this, and just in appreciation for, being able to do all that. So, that was one of the, I would say, somewhat transformational lessons for me, was just being in awe and being humble and taking a knee on the summit.
That is really a cool take, because what you're describing is gratitude through the process, not accomplishment. And that, I'm sure, has ripple effects in other parts of your life, from just taking in that sense of awe and thankfulness and gratitude for where you were. And it's, that cliche saying of it's about the journey, not the destination. But I know also, the times I've been in the mountains, it always is about the journey. The destination is cool, but if that's all you think about, you miss so many details along the way that just bring life to the soul. So that's really cool to me that you found that and figured that out early. And I know you and I have both heard the stories of the adventure seekers that are just adrenaline junkies. They pursue that dopamine hit and they pursue the big things because of that immediate gratification. But what you're describing is wholeheartedly different than that. So I want to ask this question in terms of Rainier, but also other things that you've done. I know that at any point of pushing your body to a limit, there's a point where your mind has to tell your body, or I'm sorry, get it backwards. Your body has to tell your mind to be quiet. And we're going to keep doing this because your brain is saying, we've got to shut this thing down. This is dangerous. And I'm curious, with any of these mountain adventures, where do you find that point where you're having to push past the stop? And what do you typically find in yourself when you do that?
Yeah, so the mind is almost always going to give out before the body does. And so we can typically go farther than what our mind is telling us. So just like you're saying, our mind's going to say, quit, quit, quit. So I'm not an adrenaline seeking junkie like some of these folks that might do these really extreme things. So I always go with guiding companies. And so I know I've always got these professionals around me because I'm not a professional mountain climber by any stretch of the imagination. I'm someone who likes to just go out and challenge myself and do the preparation that's required to have a great experience out of the mountains. But yeah, I mean, I do get tired. I do run into the points where I'm really tired, and I can always tell when I'm tired because I get angry and I start getting short, with someone else. And it's like, I remember not this past summer, but the year before when we climbed Glacier Peak, which was a 39 mile round trip with a 50-pound backpack. And on the way back, it was the last day getting back to the trailhead was a long trip. Well, the guy that was leading us, this was his first time doing Glacier Peak. And he took a wrong turn. So we ended up going even farther than we needed to. And to me, that's frustrating because I'm like, man, get the route right. I don't, I love being out here, but I'm also really tired. So I could tell, okay, Steve, calm down, just enjoy yourself here. So I would say one of I'm going to call it a trick, whether it's a trick or not, I don't know. But when I'm climbing, I really get so focused on what's right in front of me. And what's really cool when you're doing the summit push and it's 2:00 in the morning, it's dark outside, you got your headlamp on, you're looking down and your headlamp is illuminating this spot right in front of you. And all you can see is this white spot in front of you. And typically I'm walking in somebody else's footsteps. And so I'd say it's almost like being in a trance where you're high up on a mountain, there's a little bit of danger. Your senses are so heightened because you have nothing else to think about outside of the world except for the step in front of you. Your sense of hearing is so attuned because you're trying to listen for an avalanche, you're trying to listen for a rock fall, you're trying to listen for someone yelling, falling, so you're just have such a heightened sense of awareness. And so that focus alone, I think, is helpful in terms of not worrying too much about how tired I am. It's like, I'm just taking the next step. I think another thing that I do is I actually will count in my head. And I can always tell myself, I count to 10. So I take 10 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 10. And then I go back to 1, 2, 3, 4 to 10. So I keep counting 10 steps. And I'm always telling myself, I can always do 10 steps. And as long as I keep stringing these 10 steps together, I'm going to get to where I need to go. So it's not that I think about, I can't wait to get to the trailhead and I've got another 3 miles to go or whatever. I just got to get 10 more steps. I can do 10 more steps. So I'm really convincing myself, take 10 more steps, and I'm counting it in my head. I'm counting my breaths along the way. So I play those things to take my mind off of how my body is physically feeling. And that seems to help.
Do you have I'll call it a suffering mantra other than these little tricks? Or what are you saying to yourself in those moments where it's just really, really hard?
Well, also, I'd say 2 things there. One is I'll think back to previous trips that I've done And I'll say to myself, I've done this before.
Yeah.
And it was harder before. And I've done that. So yeah, I can do this. This isn't out of my realm of capability. That I'd say that's one thing. And then a second thing is I'll go back to my preparation and I'll say, I've done the hard work to get to this point where I can get through this. And so I'd say those are the two things: is I've done the preparation and I've done this before, I can do it again.
Yeah, that's really good. And all of those are techniques or tools that get you out of that internal voice that is part of the stop mechanism for your body. So that you've found your tell, which is the anger or the frustration when you hit that point. What do you find? What do you learn about yourself when you go beyond that? So you've used these techniques. You may or may not get to the summit that you're trying to get, but what do you learn about yourself when you go past that stop point?
Well, I think about attention here. And so I mentioned the first trip was like, hey, I got to get to the summit. It's all about the summit. And then the trips after that, it was pretty much, I want to enjoy the journey. Again, sort of the cliche, and it's a cliche because it's actually true. But what I try and do is I try and strike a balance between whatever trip I'm going to do. If it's too easy, then reaching the summit or whatever my destination is on that particular trip, I may not appreciate it as much because it was like pretty easy to get there. Now I'm still going to appreciate it because I love being out in nature. I love being out in the forest. I love being, crossing a river or whatever. So I'm still going to appreciate that. But the hard work it took to get to that ultimate destination, to see that view, maybe I won't appreciate it quite as much. Now that's one tension. Then the other end of that tension is if it's way too hard, like my first trip on Rainier, where I wasn't as prepared as I needed to be. If it's way too hard and I get to the top or the destination, I'm not going to appreciate it either because it was too hard. I'm too tired. I just need to get down and get back. So as I think about my trips, I think about these two tensions. I want it to be hard enough that it's a strong challenge, that there's some question whether or not I'm going to make it or not, but not too hard that even if I make it, I'm just going to be dead beat and I'm not going to enjoy it. So I try and add an element that's new on each of my trips. So for example, a couple of years ago when we did Glacier Peak is in Washington. It's the most remote of the Cascade volcanoes. It's not a high mountain. I think it's 10,000 and change, but it's about an 18-mile hike from the trailhead to the summit and 18-mile hike back. So the new element there was that was a much longer hike than I was used to. And it was about a 50-pound pack going all that way. And I'm not a big guy. I'm not a super strong guy. So, that was a decent load for me. So that was the new element that I'm like, okay, this is going to be something new. That's going to be challenging myself. This past summer, the new challenge was I climbed Mount Shuckson, which is also in Washington. And it has about a 700 summit peak that's a rock climb. And I'd never really done a significant rock climb. So, and parts of it were close to vertical. And so we're going up this last 700 feet. Of course, again, I go with guiding companies. So the guide goes up there. They put some protection in up above us. We're on a rope. And so we're climbing up. Now they're not pulling us up, but we got the rope in case we fall. So I was pretty confident that I wasn't going to fall off the mountain and kill myself, but it was a new challenge and keeps me interested in trying new things. And that was another incredible trip with great weather, and everybody made it to the top and back down safely. So yeah, I again, try and strike that tension between I want it to be hard so that I can appreciate the challenge, but not too hard that I'm going to be beat when I make it.
That's really a cool idea to think in terms of two ends of the spectrum that are tugging against each other. And what you're saying though is you're intentional about finding that middle point. You're not just going out and chasing some mountain or again the adrenaline hit. but the two words that I think I heard you say were intention and attention. The intention in the planning of what you're challenging yourself, and then when you're on it, your attention is focused in sometimes on that footstep just in front of you. And I'm sure those skills translate back into your normal life, into your work experience. I've heard you even translate that into some of the business planning ideas that you and I have talked about over the last few years. So what I want to ask about next is, we've kind of stayed at the beginning of this adventure course of your life. Since then, what was the most challenging pursuit that you've done? Whether most dangerous or the hardest thing, you pick, but I think what I want to get a sense of is, what was that most challenging thing that you've ever done?
I would say there was one trip where I actually got scared, and it was on Mount Rainier. And this was the third time that I climbed Mount Rainier. So first time, I've already told you about that. Second time was on the Emmons route, which is a beautiful trip, and made it to the summit. And then after that second Rainier trip, I went down to Mount Adams, which is another volcano in the state of Washington, and had a spectacular trip on Mount Adams. And then I thought, okay, let's go back to Rainier and let's do a more technically challenging route on Rainier. And so this was 2010. And we start climbing, and we're trying to go up to our high camp. And we hit a pretty serious storm, and it's blowing like 50 miles an hour. And again, carrying a heavy pack, probably 50 pounds. And so we're going up, we're at probably maybe 9,000 feet or so. And we're literally getting blown over because it was so windy. And so we get to our camp area, and we had to dig out blocks of snow because it was so windy. To get our tents up, we had to create a big snow wall because it was so windy. So the first thing we do is we're digging snow, creating a big snow wall. And then we put the tent up. And on this particular route, the crux of the route is, depending on the time of year, it could be a sheer ice wall that you have to climb up. And at this particular time of the year, it was an ice wall, and fairly steep and fairly long. And I'm thinking, okay, it's super windy. This is an ice climb. I've never done an ice climb before, and I'm nervous. And the guides are like, we're not sure if the weather stays the way it is. We're probably not going to be able to climb. It's going to be a game time decision. We'll probably make our decision about 1 or 2 in the morning. And I'm quietly thinking to myself, man, I hope they call this thing off, because I just, I'm not feeling good about this. So like 1 o'clock in the morning, the guides come in and they say, sorry guys, the weather just isn't going to allow us to do a summit climb. So you can sleep in a little bit longer. We'll get up early. We'll go down the mountain a little bit. We'll find some other place, and we'll practice some ice climbing on the lower slopes. And, I hate to admit this, but secretly I was relieved because I was nervous. And so then we get up that morning and we go down a little lower, and we did some ice climbing. I'm like, this is cool. I like this. This was fun. And of course, there was no danger. I mean, we're doing some top roping and whatever, but that was a lot of fun. And so I would say, that one, I was scared and didn't really want to finish the climb. And I'm sure the other guys were frustrated because I'm sure, they wanted to go, but that one. And, other than that, I mean, there were some other times where, even on that first trip up Rainier, as we were crossing an area which is known for rockfall. Sure enough, 3 a.m, the guide stopped, and we hear some rocks going down, and everyone turns up with their headlamps to see if they can see a rock coming at them, and it didn't hit us. And then we walked a little bit further, and of course you can see the path of the rocks that went right across the route that we were on. So, but nobody was affected by it. So there's been those kinds of things on different trips where you get some rockfall and whatnot, but I wouldn't say any close calls along those lines.
A few years ago, you actually were injured pretty badly on one of the trips. Was that, how was that as an experience as compared to some of these other trips that you've been on? Obviously, I'm sure it was disappointing, but tell me a little bit about that story.
It was a really stupid mistake on my part. So we were on Mount Shasta.
That happens.
And yeah, I mean, again, I learned a lesson, it
Yeah.
taught me something. And so we were on Mount Shasta. It was a Saturday morning, and that evening we were going to start the climb. And so Saturday morning we go over to the mountain, we're on the lower slopes, and we're just doing some practice stuff with the guides. And so we finished all the practicing, and then the guide said, okay, if you want to just, slide down the hill here another time, and I'll take some pictures, do whatever you want. I'm like, okay, great. So everyone's taking their turn, and then it's my turn, and I'm standing at the top of this hill. And I said, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide down. I got my ice axe. I'm going to roll over. I'm going to do a self-arrest. So take some cool pictures of me doing a self-arrest. So I jump up, land on my butt, and I start sliding down. And essentially I'm glissading. And what that means is you're sitting on your butt, you got your legs out in front of you, and you're digging your heels into the snow a little bit to control your speed. You got your ice axe over to the side. Well, I dug my right heel in too deep, and it got stuck while the rest of my body kept sliding. And so right leg is stuck, rest of the body keeps sliding. What happens? The right leg ankle snaps.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I get down to the bottom of the hill, and my right leg is just dragging behind me. And I'm like, oh, I think I sprained it, So I try and stand up and put some weight on it. And I'm like, that's not working really well. I said, hey, can one of you guys help me? And so, they come over, and, they sort of kind of take a look at, oh, I think it's just sprained, you'll be okay. And so since this was the end of our training, we started walking back to the cars and go back to our hotel for the night. Well, I had one guy that was sort of hanging on to, had an arm around his shoulder, and we get a little ways. I'm like, man, I cannot put any weight on this leg. And so another guy comes over, I put my arm over his shoulder. So they're almost carrying me back to the car. And then at the end, I'm like, I can't even do this. So then they give me a piggyback ride back to the car. Yeah. So, and it's about, I think maybe a 30 or 40 minute back to Shasta, the town. And I'm in, and the guides are like, oh, take your boot off. Let's take a look at it. Okay. And so we take the boot off, and it's, oh, I'm 99% sure it's not broken. I'm like, okay. So I'm in the car, and I'm like, man, this is starting to hurt. And we finally, they take me to the hospital, and they check me in, and I'm sitting there in one of these rooms, and it's 20, 25 minutes. No one's checking on me. I finally have to ring the nurse. I'm like, man, I'm in a lot of pain. Is there anything you can give me for the pain here? So, oh yeah. So they gave me some pain pills or whatever. They put me in x-rays. And then a little bit later, I get the message. The nurse says, yep, the doctor took a look at it. Says you got a broken ankle, and you're going to have surgery tomorrow morning at 11:30. I'm like,
wow.
Okay. Yeah. So spent Saturday night in the hospital in Shasta, California, and had surgery the next morning at about 11:30. And I came out of surgery and woke up at about maybe 1:30. By 3:00, they had checked me out. I'm like, okay. And got wheeled, one of my climbing buddies took me back to the hotel. And that evening they had the celebration party for the rest of the climbers that finished the trip. And that's a whole nother story that we probably don't have time to go into, but there were 17 of us, less me makes it 16. And then of those 16, I think only 3 made it to the summit because of bad weather.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so they had a party that evening, and I ended up going to the party, and I was all drugged up on hydrocodone or one of those drug, pain pills. And so I was feeling good. And I don't know if you've listened to it or not, but I actually recorded on my digital recorder that evening, and basically the whole trip. So I've got basically a whole story about that trip. And so there's a lot of detail if anybody wants to listen to that. But
yeah, that's cool.
But yeah, so again, but that was a stupid thing, and I realized, okay, you can never take your eye off the ball, meaning you always have to pay attention, because the littlest stupid thing that you do in the mountains could break your ankle. And mine was broken in 3 places. I've got 11 pins in my ankle to this day. I've got a plate in there with 9 pins on that. I got a couple pins elsewhere. So just a stupid thing. And, unfortunately, the surgeon was amazing, and the ankle is as good as new and has not bothered me since then. And that was 2016 when that happened. And I've had several trips since then.
But it was that split second of taking your gaze in a different direction and not paying attention. And the mountain gave you the consequence in that
Absolutely.
split second.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so
that's really interesting.
yeah, I mean, it just reinforces how important the details are. Every little thing. You can't lose your attention for a split second, because that's all it takes to change the rest of your life.
What, as you plan these, I mean, I don't know exactly how the timing worked out with the age of your kids when you started into these different trips, but talk to me a little bit about how you have planned for both the time, the training time, the time to actually go do this, and then around the financial resources of making this a priority in your life.
Yeah. So when I started climbing in 04, the first trip, and then 08, 09, and 10, we have 3 daughters. And back then they were like in high school and college. Actually, well, maybe not college yet, but in like middle school and high school. And my wife is a saint. I'll just make that clear. And she was very generous to allow me to go on these trips. And in terms of the training, I am very disciplined in the training. And I don't mean discipline in a negative sense of the word, like I force myself to do these things. I actually enjoy working out. I look forward to the working out that I do. And I'm an early riser. So almost all of my workouts are done early in the morning and on, early on the weekends. So tried not to impinge upon family time in that way. So, I'm basically done with my workouts, when the kids are getting up, that kind of thing. So try not to impinge upon too much of family time. And then, yeah, so then when I take the trip, typically gone for, 5 or 6 days. And like I said, my wife was very, very gracious to let me do those guy things. And I would say to her, some guys go hunting all the time. Some guys play golf every weekend. I don't do that. I do 1 or 2 trips a year. And so, yeah. So
Is that about what it averaged out, has averaged for you, 1 or 2 trips a year?
Yeah, pretty much 1 trip a year. Yeah. Yeah. I'd like to actually ramp that up now. I mean, our 3 kids they're all out of college and all on their own doing well. So it's just my wife and I at this point. She still
Do you have
chides
any
me though
interest in doing these trips?
No.
None. Yeah.
No.
What were you going to say? She still tried you?
Well, I was just gonna say, she's still chides me that I go on these trips without her. I'm like, you are welcome to come climb with me. And I have no interest sleeping on ice, 10,000 feet up on a mountain.
Yeah.
It's not her idea of a good time.
Yeah, it's a special breed that wants to do those kind of things for fun.
Yeah. But I will say this coming summer of 23, what our current plan is, well, actually, I'm signed up for my next trip, which is Mount Olympus in Olympic National Park in Washington. So our plan is we have 2 of our 3 daughters are out in the Portland, Oregon area. And so our plan is to spend about 3 weeks or so out in the Pacific Northwest at the end of July into August. And in the middle of that, I'll do the Mount Olympus climb. So she'll be out there with me. She's not going to do the climb, but she'll be hanging out with the kids while I'm up on the mountain.
It's a good way to do it. So you've got, I know you have a list of things that you want to do, whether you call it a bucket list or a to-do list. What's the one you're most excited about?
Well, I'd say a couple things, actually maybe 3 things. So one is I've got this idea that I would like to climb the 10 highest Cascade volcanoes. And I really like climbing the volcanoes. They're just beautiful mountains. And so I think I'm more than halfway done. I've still got to do Mount Hood in Oregon, got to do Mount St. Helens. I think there's a couple in Oregon that I've got to do as well. So that's sort of a bucket list item. And I hate to think of it as a bucket list as well. I just want to do these things. And if I don't, it's not gonna ruin anything for me, but it's just a nice thing to put out there. Yeah, it'd be fun to, have these 10 done. So I'd say that's one thing. A second is I'd like to get above 20,000 feet. I just think that would be fun. And so me and my regular climbing partner, we are planning on going to Ecuador at some point. And Ecuador has several volcanoes, one of which is a 20,000 foot volcano. What's interesting about that one is, and this is a little bit of trivia, is the summit of that mountain, it actually straddles the equator, has serious glaciers on it. And if you were on the summit of that mountain, that is actually the farthest distance from the center of the earth. Now, think about that. Okay. So we think of Mount Everest, 29,000 feet as the highest point on earth. But the top of Mount Everest is not the farthest point from the center of the earth. Can you imagine why?
Is it the centrifugal or the force of spinning Earth makes it a little bit wider at the center than it does the top?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Look at that.
Exactly right. Yeah.
A bit of high school physics.
There you go. That is exactly right. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool. If I were to
cool.
Get to the top of that, I'm, at the highest point from the center, farthest distance from the center of the earth. So, and right on the equator. So who knew there were glaciers at the equator?
Yeah. What's the name of that mountain?
I think it's Chimborazo.
Okay.
Yeah. There's Cotopaxi is down there as well. So there's sort of these three that are the main volcanoes down there in Ecuador. And that would be a wonderful culture to experience as well. And that's another thing that I love about doing these trips, doing these guided trips, is just the people that you meet. Like the guy that I've done 5 climbing trips now. I met him on Mount Adams, and we've just done a number of trips since then together. And we did Glacier Peak together. We did Mount Shuksan together this year. We're going to be doing Mount Olympus in 2023. We'll do Ecuador together. So those two, and I think the third one, which this really would be a bucket list, is going to K2 base camp. So K2
Can you imagine
is
sitting there looking up at K2. That would be incredible. I have no interest in getting to the top of that, but being able to see that as scenery would be amazing.
Yeah. So, I mean, of course, people can do Everest base camp, and I'm like, well, yeah, that'd be cool, but that is so crowded.
Yeah.
And I just saw that one of the guiding companies that I use, they just started a K2 trek to base camp. And I'm like, now that would be cool. Very remote, very few people have done it. K2 is the second highest mountain in the world, probably the deadliest mountain. And I'm like, okay, so I want to get to the Himalayas at some point. So that would really be a good thing that I would look forward to.
How many years out before you think you do that?
Well, hopefully not too long, because like I said, I'm almost 61, and there's going to come a point where it's going to be pretty hard to do something like that. But yeah, I would hope within the next couple years. So it's not going to happen in 23, but 24 could be the year.
Cool. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, see if you can rattle these off. But I know you and I have talked about core values, both from a business standpoint, but also just personally living out life through the things that are most important to us. What would you say are your personal core values? And my other side of that question is, where have these adventures informed those core values? Or is it the other way around, where the values have pushed you towards these adventures?
Yeah, I'd say they've sort of reinforced each other, and the trips have helped me think about what are my core values. So one of them that's been a core value forever is learning. And I just love to learn. And that's one reason why I host several podcasts, because I just love talking to people. I love getting their stories. And so learning is definitely one of them. Another one is fortitude, which is kind of a weird word, but that really was informed with the climbing stuff that I do, is just to have that determination, that drive, that challenging myself to persevere even when things are difficult. So that's one that I think about. Transformation is another one of my values. And I think of that in terms of that first trip, Rainier, that we've talked about, where I realized it's not about conquering the mountain. It's about being humble. It's about being in awe. It's about being grateful. And so that was a bit of a transformational moment for me, is to really make that realization. And I would say another one is discipline. And I think we touched on that here just a little bit. And again, I don't think of discipline as I have to do this. And when I think about my workouts, I mean, people might look at me and they say, man, where do you find the time to do that? Or how can you be so consistent at doing that? And so one of the little goals that I set for myself every year is I want to work out 80% of the days each year. And I meticulously track my workouts. And so this year I'm at 96%. So I've worked out 9.6 days out of 10 this year.
So you can take the rest of the year off and still be above 80%.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, another thing I do is I want to do 15,000 push-ups a year. And so I've got a spreadsheet. I track the push-ups, and I hit that actually a few days ago. So I'm over 15,000 now, and I got another few weeks left in the year as we're having our conversation today. But I don't do those things because I feel like I've got discipline. It's like, this is like who I am. This is a part of me. And maybe you call it my identity. It's like, I identify as someone who exercises. I identify as someone who is fit, and I feel good about that. I was at the airport 2 days ago. And if you go to O'Hare, there's a part where you go underground and they have these fancy lights over your head. And then you get to the other side, and you can either take the escalator up or you can take the stairs up. Okay. So which one do you think I took?
Stairs.
Of course.
Yeah,
And
of
so
course.
everyone else is taking the escalator, and so I'm taking the stairs. And I got my backpack on. I'm going through the airport. I'm going up these, multiple flights of stairs, and everyone else is taking the escalator. And I just feel good that, again, I'm very blessed. I'm fortunate that I've had good health. And certainly some of that, I think, is I've had good genes. But I try to take care of myself, and I look forward to the exercising. I look forward to the working out. I like the feeling afterwards. I like the feeling of being fit. And so if anybody's listening to this and they're saying, man, I don't have the time for this, I don't have the time for that, it's like, it just needs to become who you are. And the initial effort of trying to get to that point where it becomes who you are, yeah, that might take some discipline, but there's going to come a transition point, a pivot point, where you realize, oh man, I don't have to work out today. I get to work out today. I look forward to this. And I do simple things like, before I go to bed at night, I go into the closet. I think about what's my workout tomorrow. I pull up my workout clothes. My wife is in the living room because she stays up later than I do. I come out and I literally drop them on the living room floor. It's like this evening ritual, and I'm sure she's shaking her head every time. And so there he goes again. But I sort of create this path of least resistance. So it's like, I know what my workout's going to be the night before I go to bed. I put all my clothes out, so I'm ready to go. And it's like, I get up way before the sun comes up, and it's just part of my routine.
Yeah, a little bit of accountability too, because you'd have kind of the walk of shame if you did sleep in and didn't work out. You got to go pick those clothes up and walk them back to the closet so they don't lay there all day. So a little bit of self-accountability, I'm sure.
Yep.
That's good. So it sounds like, I know you as a person that lives through your values, and I can see how these different trips inform that and are informed by the values that you hold as most important. If you could boil down your lessons from your adventures, the Steve Sanduski adventures, If you could boil it down into the main thing that you seem to come away with, what would you say that is?
I would say a few things. One is that measuring progress generates confidence. So like I said, I measure everything. That's important to me. So I think it's important to just track your progress. And I'd also relate that to mastery. We haven't really talked about this, but I'm really into this idea of mastery. And I think some people, when they think of mastery, they think of, well, you're the number one person in the world. You're the GOAT. Okay. So you've achieved mastery as a basketball player, as a golfer, or as a grandmaster in chess, or whatever the case may be. I think of mastery in terms of it's an aspiration, not a destination.
Good.
And so I am focused on mastery in everything that I do, meaning I do hot yoga. I practice hot yoga. And so when I'm doing a pose, it's like I will never, quote, master the pose in the sense of I'm going to be the world's best at this particular pose. But I always think about, can I make an adjustment here? Can I go a little bit farther over there? Can I ease my way into this pose and maybe reach the same place I did before, but do it with more ease and grace? Can I do it with a smile on my face? And so I think about all these little ways that I can improve and get better. And I also talked about tension. And I think about, as I get older, there's probably less things that I'm going to be physically able to do. So I have to think about what are different ways that I can do things that will still make me feel like I'm making some progress. So I mentioned that on one of my trips, I made it a much longer hike. On the trip earlier this year, it was like we added a rock climb, which I'd never really done before. So I'm always thinking about what's something new that I can add to that. So I think that's something that is important. I also think it's important to step in and out of your comfort zone. And I think we always have to be challenging ourselves, because if we're not challenging ourselves, it's like stagnant water. Okay. And what happens with stagnant water? Well, stuff is going to start growing in it. And, you don't want to have that happen. And so another reason why I love getting outdoors and doing these adventure things is it gives me a way to challenge myself. It gives me a reason to continue to do all the workouts that I do and something to look forward to. So I think that's an important piece as well. And I think another thing that I would also recommend is for everybody to have what I would call a guiding philosophy. And that essentially is how you think about your life. What are let's call it like the principles that guide how you go through life. And I've actually created a little exercise around that. I'll take just a brief second here to tell you what it is. It's got several components, but one is it's basically understanding what your truth is. And basically to complete that little exercise, you just simply ask yourself, what I know to be true is, and then you answer that. And then you say, because, and then you write, well, why do you know that to be true? And then do that 15 times. So that's going to help you really get after what you really know to be true. And then the second piece is just a values exercise. So really identifying what your values are. Third is what I call your non-negotiables. And so these are really the standards that you hold yourself to. And one of my non-negotiables is to measure rigorously. I think we've talked about that. Another one of my non-negotiables is to learn something new every day. Another one is to be prepared. Another one is to take notes. Another one is to love generously. So those are really some of my non-negotiables about how I go through life. And then the fourth one is what I call a rallying cry. And this is just sort of your personal mantra about how you kind of get through life and what keeps you grounded. And my mantra is run uphill. And
yeah.
The quick story behind that is when I was running cross country in high school, my sophomore year, I I learned pretty quickly that when you pass somebody running uphill, they never pass you back. It's extremely demoralizing to the
Totally.
person that you pass when you pass them uphill. So that became my signature in cross country, was when the hills came, everyone's, oh, I hate those hills. I hate Heartbreak Hill. I'm like, I love that. And so that's when I would turn on the afterburners and I would just fly uphill and pass everybody. And it ended up working out pretty well for me. And so as I reflected back a number of years ago, I thought, that's really my rallying cry. It's run uphill. Because when you do what other people won't, you'll be able to achieve what other people can't. And so that's my little personal mantra is run uphill. And, yeah, I think about that in the mountains as well. As I've done this before, just run uphill.
Yeah. But I think that's really a cool way to frame all that you've done, is this idea of, we've talked about the attention and intention about every step that you take along the way. And then on the other side of that is the mastery, the pushing your limits, becoming better, doing harder things with each new time. And that, I know who David Goggins is, but he's one of those guys that is at the very end of the spectrum that just does everything hard. And he wasn't always that way, but he that's where he lives now. And what I've heard you say is that for you, it's been this incremental push where you put yourself outside of your comfort zone a little bit more each time, and you discover something new on the other side of that. So I think that's super cool. Very much, I've had some of those same experiences with outdoor adventures as well. And I think what gets me so excited about these conversations with the podcast is finding out how people do that and why. Why do they do that? Because not everybody does. I think we've covered a lot of that ground with you about what got you to this point, where you came from, and kind of the incremental things that happened in your life along the way to get you to those whys. Why do you climb really hard mountains and spend the time and energy to get outside? But not everybody has that. So I'm hoping that there are people that listen to this that are, well, I'm inspired. I love having these conversations. You and I could do this for hours at a time and have a blast doing it. But so it's inspiring to me, but I want other folks to hear this and go, maybe I could do that. Steve sounds like a normal guy. He's been intentional and paid attention along the way, but if he can do it, I can do it. And so I find what you've done very inspiring, and I hope other people listening will hear the same thing. So I do have one other question that I'll take us out on, and it's a little bit of a rabbit trail, so maybe it gets cut from the final upload. But is there anything else along what we've talked about that you want to add to it before I wrap us up?
Yeah. I want to share one final thought here, and that is that I remember basically on every trip, but this particular trip is one that sticks out, is I always enjoyed the process of preparing for a climbing trip. I love looking at the list of all the stuff that I got to bring. I love thinking about my food rations. I love thinking about my clothing. What's the right mix of clothes and jackets and parkas and whatever that I have to take? And can I cut an ounce here or there? So this particular trip, it's 2 days before I leave home. I get all my stuff out. I'm in the basement. I got all my stuff laid out and I'm checking things off. And then the day before my trip, I'm like, I can, maybe I don't need that. I don't need this. I, cut back on my food just a little bit. So now I fly out to Washington, get to my hotel room the night before. We meet with the guiding company. I'm like, I'm going to pull this out. I don't think I'll need this. So then we get to the guiding company, we do the gear check. And of course, the guides go around and they check and make sure you've got the right stuff. And they're like, oh, you're not going to need that. You're not going to need that. It looks like you got too much food. So I pull some more stuff out. And so this climbing, it's another tension. It's another balance between, I want to take everything I need and need everything that I take. Yeah. And so as I reflected back on, I want to travel light, I want to travel alpine style. And I wrote a book a number of years ago called Avalanche, the 9 Principles for Uncovering True Wealth. And one of the things that I wrote in that book was that when you break life down to its essentials, it doesn't weigh much. And it applies in the mountains because when I'm climbing, everything I need to survive, I'm carrying on my back. I need some food. I need some clothing. I need some shelter. And you and I imagine many of the people listening to this, we have all the comforts of modern day life. And it's easy for us to take for granted what we have. But there's a lot of people who don't have anything close to what we have. And so one of the beautiful things to me about climbing is going into the mountains and just taking with me the bare necessities, just the things that I need to survive, and carry them on my back. So I think it really keeps me grounded. It keeps me humble. It keeps me grateful and appreciative of everything that I have. And so that's always a great reminder to me is I want to get rid of all these creature comforts that I have. And I just want to get back to the basics. And to me, that's another beautiful thing about these trips is I just get by with the basics.
That's really, really good, and resonates with me with a recent trip I took just a couple of weeks ago with my daughter and a friend of mine and his daughter. It was just a one night out and back on the Appalachian Trail up in Virginia through a state park called Grayson Highlands. It has wild ponies up along these bald ridges. I mean, it's pretty magical. And he made the comment to me while we were out there that, life is just so busy and so much that you have to do on a day-to-day basis and so many responsibilities, especially with kids still in the house and trying to run a business. And he said, I'm most alive when I have the least, when I'm sitting out here in the woods and all that I need is on my back. And he said, well, I need to do it more because this is where I come alive. And that's what I hear you saying, and totally resonates with any time that I've spent outdoors. Is we do a really good job of overcomplicating life, and really the things that matter most are just a few things. You can boil it down to just a few things. And I'll have to say, for a one night, 2-day trip, I weighed my pack before we left. It weighed 40 pounds. So I felt like a total amateur because I just threw everything in there. And part of it was the first backpacking trip we had taken our girls on. They're 13 and 14 years old. And there was like this fear of getting out there and not having what she needed. And being the first time, like I really wanted it to be a great experience so that they want to do it again. And
yep.
I will have to say, we were walking back into the parking lot where we left the car, and both the girls were already talking about, hey, when can we come back, Dad? When is the next trip going to be here? Are we going to do somewhere different? And my buddy Matt and I were like, yes, it worked. So we'll be back.
Good.
Yeah, but that was slightly embarrassing to have a pack weigh that much for just one night, but it was a fun trip for sure. I'll send you some pictures.
Yeah, love to see them.
So, well, I'm going to leave the other question for another time because I think the way you tied it all together with that is a perfect way to end it. And I'm very grateful for you spending an hour with me to talk through these things. And I know it's inspiring to me, and I hope anybody listening to this will get the same from it. So, Steve, thank you very much.
I appreciate it, Josh. It's been my pleasure.
Awesome.